Reselling, or simply trading one good for another, is often referred to as one of the oldest professions on earth, and for good reason. Selling on online platforms like eBay, Poshmark, Depop, and other online marketplaces has become one of the most popular ways to be a reseller in the 21st century. But what if I told you there are other ways to be a reseller? Other ways you've probably never even thought of. Hey everyone, my name is Bethany, and I, along with my husband Sean, run Trash Pandas Thrift. We are a six-figure reselling business, and here on this YouTube channel, we share with you all of our tips, tricks, and experiences, also that you can start and grow your very own reselling business too. Today, I want to open the doors and take you into the heart of Trash Pandas Thrift, what we call our reselling business, because that's truly what it is in its essence. And what is reselling? Is it just selling goods online on platforms like eBay, Poshmark, Depop, and others? Of course, that is a huge part and a great foundation. And speaking from experience, we've listed 55 items a day across platforms for years. We had an inventory system that housed over 4,000 items, and we even had an eBay house where we literally separated our home with one floor for the business and one floor for living. And fast forward to now, we work out of a 200 square foot warehouse space, and we aim to keep as little inventory revolving as possible, with most of our items going from source to sold in the same week. So it begs the question, and it makes me think about what truly makes someone a reseller. It's something that I've thought about and asked myself for years. For me, the joy of reselling is derived from the thrill of the hunt. There is nothing I love more than digging for gold at the Goodwill outlet and breathing life into discarded goods. Because it's like I know that I'm continuing the life cycle of an item in the same way a merchant would thousands of years before me. And as a history buff, that's something that truly makes me feel alive to my core. We changed our business model a little over a year ago, and we made a whole YouTube video about it, including a fancy name, Thrifted Wholesalers. And then we changed it yet again this past spring. So honestly, Trash Pandas Thrift, our beautiful baby, it is ever evolving, flowing in balance with our life as we mold our business around the lives we'd like to lead. So that fancy name is true, right? We are thrifted wholesalers, and yes, we are whatnot sellers. We have been eBay sellers. We've been top 10 world ranked Depop sellers, reposhers, but at the very core, we are just resellers. Now, let's talk about some of the ways that you can create a thriving, profitable reselling business that works for you and your life, whether or not you see anyone else doing it the same way. Because for a long time, we have not seen anyone do it the same way that we do. So there are a bunch that I'm going to go over that maybe you've heard before, and quite a few that unless you've heard us talk about it in depth in the past, you may not have ever even heard of in any reselling business at all. Number one is going to be traditional reselling platforms, aka what we know of through our eBay house, listing and selling items. It is the absolute foundation in the 21st century. Whenever you look up reselling on YouTube, on social media, it is like step one. It's in your game of life board, it's step one. It's what allowed me to even discover reselling at all. And that's why I like to think about it as the absolute best foundation. It truly taught me how to be a reseller. And most resellers are going to see that as maybe one of the only and the best avenue of reselling. Number two is ThreadUp and The RealReal. I have been a user of ThreadUp and The RealReal for quite a few years now, and I love them because it was honestly my first experience of doing something outside of a traditional reselling platform as a way to amplify our business. So a couple years ago, when ThreadUp was doing partner kits, they had this program where you could send in clothes. So ThreadUp, if you've never heard of them, they are a online consignment service where usually you send in clothes to them and they resell it on their site themselves. You're then paid a commission once the item sells. Alternatively, a few years ago, they were doing a interesting program where they did something called partner kits. So you would send in clothing, and instead of it being paid out to you once it's sold, you were paid upfront, not in money, but in gift cards. And just like bartering of thousands and thousands of years ago, I saw that and I thought, there's a way for us to make a good amount of money through this. Gift cards are not. So, with all of the excess inventory, and honestly, all of the inventory that I didn't even know how to sell at the time, because I was only selling on Poshmark, on eBay, on Depop, I was at the Goodwill outlet every day, and I thought there must be a way for me to sell all of these clothes that no one wants, right? These brands that otherwise maybe they have great retail prices, but their resale value isn't very good, I thought at the time, right? Mature brands, trendy brands, anything that had that high retail value that maybe in my store didn't perform well, but there were still people looking for it on the grander landscape of secondhand shopping, like ThreadUp, somewhere where a lot of different people are shopping. So I would take clothes that I otherwise didn't want to list online at the time, and I would send it into ThreadUp through their partner kit program. You had a list of stores that you can then choose as the store that you wanted to get your gift card payout for. I would choose Reformation. And not for the reason you thought. Reformation is obviously such a popular brand. They've only gotten more popular throughout the years. But I was trying to find a way to turn trash into gold, and it's not trash, of course, trash to cash. And the way to do that, I thought at the time, was there was this huge phenomenon like 2 or 3 years ago about the hot girl walk belt bags, the original exploding of belt bags, specifically Lululemon belt bags, but of course Lululemon wasn't on the partner kit, right? Reformation was. And now you're probably thinking to yourself, Reformation doesn't have belt bags. No, but they do have a sustainability section where they cover and they actually sell other sustainable brands, house brands in the Reformation brand. So they sell other brands like Patagonia, a sustainable brand that also does belt bags. So I would trade in all of this clothing and I would get gift cards to Reformation in return, and I would take each gift card and I would redeem them on Reformation's site for new with tags Patagonia belt bags over and over and over and over and over again. And these bad boys sold like hotcakes. We couldn't even keep them in stock once I listed them, a replenishable listing, for maybe more than a week or two. A lot of times they even went overseas, and I realized that global shipping with these Patagonia belt bags, it was a key. It was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought to myself, okay, this is really cool. I'm taking this clothing that otherwise no one would have even wanted. I wouldn't have even sold it at the time, because honestly, years ago, I didn't even like to do style-based sourcing yet. That was still a whole new world to me, and it unlocked my brain into thinking, there's a different way to resell, and I'm just not thinking about it. Then I looked into places like The Real World, where I started sending stuff into, and I started to get passive income every month that wasn't even related to eBay or Depop or Poshmark, and I was absolutely hooked. That was years ago, and it's probably what's took our brain, Sean and me, onto this track of how can we do something in a different way? Even if no one's really talking about it, how can I make money in a way that I love and is profitable that maybe no one else is doing? And that brings me to number 3, live selling platforms like Whatnot. Today, this is so huge. Live selling platforms like Whatnot are so unique, truly, because it's about reselling, but in a different way. It's truly putting at its core a completely different landscape of what sells. And you have this type of freedom that I've experienced to curate for a show in a way that truly makes me feel like a store owner, which for a long time and even now is still my ultimate dream of having my own physical store location. It's about building a community and creating a brand culture together in a way that for a long time we like to do on eBay, Poshmark, and Depop through repeat buyers. And you can see that come to life in a live selling platform like Whatnot in a way that you normally can't on other traditional marketplaces because you don't interact with your buyers as often live. It's also an interesting way to think about reselling because it's opened up an even another door that we never even thought about until we started live selling, and that is making relationships with other sellers in person and online and taking on consignments. That's something new to us, honestly, even in the last few months again. Like I said, Trash Pandas Thrift, we're always evolving. And yes, I'm a Goodwill outlet lover to my core, to my absolute core. But our business is one that takes our resources and uses them to its full advantage. And that's always how I like to think about reselling and encourage you to think about reselling as well. The only thing better than a low cost of good is no cost of goods at all. That's where consignment came in for us. And we have quite a few people now that we made relationships with, honestly, that inadvertently turned into a business relationship now that we sell consignment for them. This is honestly even another way to think about it. And this is number 4, what we do as another arm of Trash Pandas Thrift. And this is what I called that fancy name before, thrifted wholesale. I like to think about it as, if you've never heard us talk about it before, it's truly just bulk reselling to brick and mortar stores and other resellers that do sell on traditional platforms, as well as these brick and mortar stores. It is wholesale because you are selling in bulk to these people, to these stores, consignment stores, any landscape, any type of reselling store or other reselling person. But it's thrifted. So it's not like liquidation. In the reselling community, sometimes you think about wholesale and you kind of combine it in with liquidation. That's not what I'm referring to. It's exactly what you would do when you're buying at the Goodwill outlet, you're sourcing, but instead of listing it yourself, you're shipping it off. You're shipping it off usually in bulk. For us, that's what this looks like. We can go to the Goodwill outlet and we can sell as many categories as I'm able to source and sell as possible. And that's huge because honestly, it took our time spent working and it dramatically decreased it. Because the more categories I can source for while I'm sourcing, the less time I have to dedicate to sourcing itself. Now, there are a long list of categories that we source and we sell, and we don't even talk about them on YouTube all the time, which I thought now was a great day to think about and to talk about our business in its totality. Because honestly, unless you're walking through every single day working alongside me, I realize you probably don't even know what our business even looks like. So this is what we sell in our business to give you an idea. We sell modern women's and men's clothing with great sell-through rates on eBay, on Poshmark, on Depop that other resellers would sell there. We also sell modern women's and men's clothing that are style-based pickups. These two, right, the sell-through rates and those type of bolos, as well as style-based sourcing and picking, that's something that we talk about often on this channel. But what if you could sell even more categories? What if all of the clothing you're leaving behind, what if you had an outlet, a place where you could go and sell that to? And if you're already there, that means more profit in the same amount of time or less. These are those categories that we thought of and we found a way to sell. Trendy pieces that you could find at buy, sell, trade, and consignment stores like Buffalo Exchange, for example. Brands like Brandy Melville, brands like PacSun, Garage, trendy brands. Sometimes they have a younger audience, pieces like that. That's a whole other category that we sell that honestly we don't have a ton of other competition, if at all, while we're sourcing. Another category we sell in is vintage, Y2K, and true vintage pieces. Now, it's no secret, I am a lover, an absolute lover of vintage, whether it's reselling on traditional platforms that we talk about here or reselling it to brick and mortar vintage stores, archival stores, other resellers who also sell vintage, and Depop sellers. There are so many ways to think about it. You can take that vintage piece, and even if you're not a vintage seller yourself, what if you could bulk sell it to someone else who does? That, honestly, to begin with, is why I even started selling vintage in the first place, because there was so much of it. And I grew up not knowing a lot about vintage, but I did grow up thrift store shopping, and there was always so much of it around me. I grew to have this absolute love for vintage, even though it's a category that when I first started reselling, I did not even pick up I left behind. And that is why on this channel, you hear me being so vocal and about how vital it is to think about reselling, not just in terms of brand, but in style and in vintage too. And now you're going to hear me talking about it in categories, like stuff like trendier pieces, mall brands like that too. And my personal favorite, another category that we sell that you might not even know, is kids clothing. We also bulk thrift wholesale kids clothing to brick and mortar kids clothing. This is my favorite, like my absolute favorite, number one, because I don't have a kid myself. It's really fun for me to curate and to actually pick up these pieces that otherwise, number one, no one else is digging for. No one else is competing with me at the Goodwill outlet for these pieces. I'm thinking of brands like, for example, Crew Cuts, right? Like Baby J. Crew, Zara Kids, Mini Bowden, stuff like that. Some of the stuff, yeah, it does resell online really well. And I was so shocked that, number one, people don't think about it reselling online. And number two, even if you don't want to, you could still pick up categories of clothing. You don't have to list it yourself traditionally to be able to resell it. Creating relationships, I think, is truly what completely changed my idea of what reselling is. And now that shifted to how many categories can I sell so that I can spend less time sourcing and more time doing other things in my business, or honestly not working in my business at all, and creating a work-life balance that is at the best it's probably ever been in years, due to thinking outside of the box, reselling in a different way that you've probably ever heard of. Now, there are some other modes too. The first thing that comes to mind is reselling in person. This is something that I have wanted to do for years. I was really interested in doing market shopping, market selling, like vintage markets, and also modern clothing markets as well. We haven't done one of those yet, but I do have my eye on one that I wanted to start doing. But we have had in-person sales. We ran an entire sale in our backyard right before we were moving out of Texas. And that was the coolest experience of my life. And I sat down and I thought, why in the world have I not done this to begin with? Like, why? It was so awesome to get the opportunity to see everyone coming to our backyard, and bins of clothing that were otherwise stale, they were sitting, or we just could not make enough room for in our move, and have these people buy it in bulk. It was such an awesome opportunity, and it's not even something you have to do with stale clothing either. It's an entire other mode of reselling. It's not just a backup plan, it's an alternative. It's a way of reselling that you may have never even thought of. There's someone in the Bay Area who does exactly that, and she holds monthly sales of vintage out of her garage. She turns her garage into a actual clothing store set up with like convertible dressing rooms and mirrors and everything, and she does monthly or bi-monthly sales out of that garage. And she is a reseller. She is definitely a reseller too. So that brings me back to, what is a reseller, right? What is a reseller? Is a reseller an eBay seller? Is a reseller a Depop seller, a whatnot seller, a thrifted wholesaler? I don't know. I think a reseller is anyone who can look at a piece of clothing and see value and give it value in a different way. That's why, honestly, when I think about selling on eBay and Depop and Poshmark, and we talk about it on this channel, we talk about selling there in a different way. We talk about giving items value. You don't only have to source items that retain value when you can give it value. And you don't only have to resell on traditional platforms like eBay and Poshmark and Depop when there are different avenues too. They may not be advertised, but they're out there, and there are so many people that have been doing exactly what we've been doing. They're just not talking on YouTube about it. It is an age-old profession, and I am grateful for the day I sat down and I started sending items into ThreadUp to get me to think about a way to form our business around our life. And that's where all of these different ways to resell was born. There are so many more that I can't even jump into this topic all the way in our business and how it can apply to yours without going into a whole series about it. There are so many more components that I want to talk about that you probably never even thought of. So this is going to be an entire series because you probably never have seen a reselling business like ours. And I know that there is a reselling business out there like yours that can be completely yours and unique too. So definitely, if you're interested in this type of content, this is something we're definitely going to be talking about a lot more. Different ways to resell that you've never heard of, and different ways to resell that you might even be scared of. The more that we talk about it, the more accessible it is to everyone. There are so many ways to resell, and I want to show you how to start and grow your very own reselling business too, no matter what it looks like. Thanks so much, you guys. If you like this kind of content, make sure to subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.